At first glance, people who see a native prairie or a restored prairie may feel there's nothing there, just a sea of plants that they might think of as weeds. Then you start to see the subtle beauty, the beauty of something like a grass, and then other subtleties, the sky and the clouds, the shadows of the clouds moving over the prairie. I used to see that over the soybean fields in Iowa when I was a kid. I loved to watch the shadows of the clouds move over the gently rolling topography in southwest Iowa. Prairies really opened my eyes to the distinctive native beauty and the unique character of the landscape that existed before we started tampering with it.
The native plant garden at the University of Wisconsin Arboretum, overlooking Curtis Prairie, is a collection of 11 plant communities clustered around the visitor center. Each one flows into the next in a subtle and near seamless mix of prairie, forest, savanna, and fen. Designed by Darrel Morrison, it is a distillation of the Prairie Spirit, a North American landscape movement that is deeply rooted in the soil of the Midwest.
I grew up on a farm in Iowa, a 160-acre farm in the 1940s and 50s. My father was practicing organic farming before the word was ever used. He didn't use chemical fertilizers. He didn't use chemicals for weed killing. We pulled weeds a lot. And my parents actually gave each of the three sons their own little plot within the vegetable garden. We could plant anything we wanted. I started out with lettuce and radishes in little rows because they were so quickly rewarding. I started planting circles and squares and various patterns with my plants. Tried peanuts one year. They were a miserable failure. But we had this opportunity to work on the farm, well, opportunity, requirement, and we grew a lot of our own food. Well, I graduated from Iowa State in 1959 with a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture. I had been taught to use trees, shrubs, lawns, and ubiquitous ground covers, very low diversity landscapes. I came to Madison early July of 1967 because of the ecology program at the university. I became familiar almost immediately with Curtis Prairie and the restorations in the Arboretum.
These restorations focused on recreating a sense of the prairie ecosystem that had once covered the heart of North America. Beginning in 1933, a group of university scientists and 200 men from the Civilian Conservation Corps planted thousands of native seedlings on a stretch of worn-out Wisconsin farmland. By 1967, when Darrel Morrison first saw Curtis Prairie, much of its original function and biotic diversity had been restored.
The Curtis Prairie was one of the first places in the world, in fact, where ecological restoration was practiced. The restored prairies really opened my eyes to the potential beauty that is connected with ecological diversity. That was a turning point for me.
Prairie beauty and native diversity were not new elements in landscape design. Beginning in 1881, O.C. Simons used a diverse range of plant species throughout Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. In 1893, Frederick Law Olmsted incorporated native plantings into his lush designs for the World's Columbian Exposition. At the same time, Jens Jensen began transforming Chicago's public parks by bringing the essence of the Illinois prairie into the city.
Jens Jensen has had a major impact on me. Jensen's philosophy was centered on spatial design and the use of light and shadow, and he was a real master of creating spaces that would appear to disappear, so there would be mystery in the landscape. As he evolved in his career, he started using not only native plants, but also natural processes where he would set things in motion, so to speak, and then let there be some change over time within his landscapes. The native plant garden at the University of Wisconsin Arboretum is really drawing on Jens Jensen's attitude that we can't really successfully copy nature, but we can get a theme from nature, we can get a dominant idea, get the key species and the key feeling. In the native plant garden, we're not really doing pure restoration. The semicircular pergola in the native garden is not a natural form. That degree of structure contrasts nicely with the seemingly more wild landscape surrounding it. And it gives a bit of a focus to that part of the garden. There's a spiral maze with Indian grass used as the enclosing element. It's a takeoff, really, on mazes in historic gardens, but a much more a prairie version of that. This isn't a replication of anything I've ever seen in nature, but it captures that sense of the movement of the grasses that occur in the native prairie.
One of the most influential people in ecology-based design was not a landscape architect, but a forester turned philosopher, Aldo Leopold.
Aldo Leopold's book, A Sand County Almanac, lays out a philosophy, the land ethic, whereby we have a responsibility to perpetuate the richness we've inherited. To me, that becomes sort of the measure of a designed landscape. Has it increased that amount of diversity and beauty, or has it diminished what might have been there previously? And in the end, what we do should never lead to a loss of species diversity on the site we're dealing with or beyond that site.
Darrel Morrison has designed native plant gardens based on these same principles at the Storm King Art Center in New York's Hudson Valley, at the Chicago Botanic Garden, at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in Austin, Texas, at the Utah Botanical Center in Kaysville, and in the Bronx at the New York Botanical Garden.
I've been really influenced by Aldo Leopold's observation that people really start to appreciate nature and quality in nature initially through the pretty elements that occur there. They might never have been in a prairie before, but then they see individual plants within that big composition. You can move from that to starting to see patterns. And then this leads to starting to think about processes that have led to the patterns. It is a progression. You start to think more about why things are where they are, and then you start to think about how you can perpetuate that. And if you're a designer, you think about how you can utilize that idea. And even deeper, you really start to think about protecting, preserving, and restoring those qualities in the landscapes that we are responsible for.